Some scientists believe we may have found signs of life on Mars 50 years ago. We know because we watched it die. And now, China has found something buried underneath the same soil that rewrites the question entirely. Because the debate was never whether Mars had life. The question is whether we're the reason it's gone. Mars destroys spacecraft. The Soviet Mars 3 lander touched the surface in 1971 and transmitted for exactly 20 seconds before going silent forever. Britain's Beagle 2 deployed its solar panels in 2003 and simply never called home. Half of every mission ever sent to Mars has failed, and yet NASA survived that graveyard and built an empire inside it. Rovers, orbiters, a helicopter, American flags in red dust. So when China announced its first Mars mission in 2020, the world assumed it would become another expensive tombstone. It wasn't. Tianwen-1 reached Mars orbit in February 2021, and 3 months later, the Zhurong rover rolled onto a vast ancient plain called Utopia Planitia, the exact same region where NASA's Viking 2 lander touched down in 1976. That location is not a coincidence. And what happened at Viking 2 is the part of this story nobody wants to say out loud. In 1976, Viking 2 scooped Martian soil into a sealed chamber, flooded it with water and nutrients, and waited to see if anything would breathe. The sensors spiked immediately, a massive CO2 surge, exactly the signal living organisms produce when they encounter food. The team almost called it the greatest discovery in human history. Then the signal died completely. The reaction switched off like a cut wire, and NASA's conclusion came fast. Chemical reaction, not biology. Iron compounds mimicking metabolism, not life. Move on. But here is what that conclusion ignores. Martian microbes, if they evolved at all, spent billions of years adapting to near-zero humidity. Their entire biology built for extreme dryness. So what happens when you flood a creature that has never once encountered liquid water? It dies in seconds from osmotic shock. The CO2 spike wasn't metabolism, it was a death rattle. If that interpretation is correct, the experiment may have accidentally destroyed what it was trying to detect. Watched the results and logged them as a chemistry problem. Zhurong landed the old way. Heat shield, parachute, retro rockets firing blind, and once down, it activated a ground-penetrating radar that fired pulses straight through the crust to read what was buried underneath, while the Tianwen-1 orbiter simultaneously mapped subsurface water ice across the entire northern hemisphere. Together, they found something the radar was never supposed to find. Beneath Utopia Planitia lay 76 distinct sediment layers, tilted at identical angles, stacked between 10 and 35 meters underground. According to Nature Astronomy 2023, that geometry matches one thing almost exactly: a coastline retreating slowly over millions of years, each waterline fossilized in rock like rings in stone. Not a lake, not a river, an ocean, one that persisted for tens of millions of years. Then CNSA released a second finding. The uppermost layers dated to 1.6 billion years ago, 700 million years more recent than models predicted. Mars held liquid water far longer than anyone believed. Where did everything living in it go? Zhurong's cameras found a clue. Surface dunes coated in a thin white mineral crust that only forms when liquid water evaporates and leaves its salts behind. That crust dates to 400,000 years ago, when Neanderthals were burying their dead in Europe, and water was still pooling on open Martian ground. Mars wobbles on its axis over hundreds of thousands of years, shifting polar ice, raising pressure, melting snow. A 2024 study found Martian soil is saturated with perchlorates, salts that keep water liquid well below freezing, a chemical antifreeze baked into the geology itself. Certain organisms survive catastrophe by shutting completely down. No metabolism, no movement, suspended animation for millions of years, waiting in dry soil for conditions to return. If Martian microbes did the same, lying dormant in perchlorate-laced ground since their ocean vanished, they would still be there in Utopia Planitia, in the exact soil Viking 2 scooped up, in the exact chamber where we added water, in the exact moment the CO2 spiked and went silent. Maybe we found them. If microbial life existed, it's possible the experiment itself interfered with it and filed it as a chemistry anomaly. China returns in 2028 with equipment to bring soil home. Will we finally know what we keep destroying?